Welcome to the Great Loop Radio podcast, brought to you by America's Great Loop Cruisers Association. We're dedicated to sharing Great Loop information and inspiration with those actively cruising, planning for, or dreaming about a Great Loop adventure. I'm Kim Russo. I'm the director of AGLCA. Today we have a great topic. We're going to talk a little bit about how we can make our loop a little bit more green. And even for those of you who maybe that's not one of your hot button issues, there's still a lot you can do that's actually helping yourself too, as well as the oceans. We're going to be talking to Seakeepers.org, which is a great organization I became aware of recently that is really doing a lot for the oceans and working with private yachts to help with some of their experiments. They've also got a green guide to boating, which we're going to discuss in some detail today. So before I bring them in, I want to take a moment, as always, to recognize and thank our Admiral sponsors. These are the businesses that support AGLCA at the highest level. They are Curtis Stokes and Associates, Great Loop Yacht Sales, Passage Maker Trawler Fest, Skipper Bob Publications, and Waterway Guide Media. As always, we encourage our listeners to support these businesses that support the Great Loop. And without further delay, I would like to introduce you to Aubrey Keith. Aubrey is the Program Development Manager for Seakeepers.org, and also Tony Gilbert. Tony is the Chief Programs Officer for Seakeepers.org. So welcome to both of you. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I think I'd come across your website a few times, but not too long ago at a Trawler Fest. They kind of you were a little bit of the buzz there, and I guess Aubrey had maybe visited. So I'm glad to actually get to speak to you both in person. First of all, tell us a little bit about Seakeepers.org and what's your core mission?
Yeah, absolutely. I can start there. So our full name, the International Seakeepers Society, is just like the name states, we are international. Although our headquarters is here in Miami, Florida, we've been able to sort of have a presence all over. And so being a nonprofit, our mission, our charitable mission, is to facilitate marine research, conservation efforts, and education, and just kind of helping those that are lacking some resources that need that, and linking them with those that have that. So what does that mean? So basically, we link the yachting and boating community with the scientific and academic communities. And so when it comes to research and trying to learn more about our environment, our marine environment, and how best to preserve it in its, in the way that it's supposed to be, in the way that we've enjoyed it for so long, you need science for that. And so that's just, basically if there's a scientist and they have a proposal and they want to research either, coral bleaching or shark conservation, whale behavior and conservation, all these different topics, I take a look at the proposal, I see where they need to be, how many of them there are, and if there is a boat in our network that's willing to take them and accommodate them for whatever time they need. So maybe they need a week out on the water. And really, I mean, yes, they're getting the benefit of having some time out on the water and not having to charter a vessel themselves, which oftentimes they can't afford that. They just don't have the funds. But really the crew or the owner / operators of these boats really get an awesome experience out of it too. So that's one facet of Seakeepers. That's what we call our scientist-led expeditions. And then we have a bunch of other facets. We have citizen science, which again, it's utilizing people and their boats for research purposes. But in this case, they don't have to take on a scientist or their team. These are things that they can do themselves or the crew can do with minimal to no training. We just kind of give them the tools to do it, and they can go out and cruise as they would, and just kind of collect these samples or these data on their own. Send it back, and then we give it to the appropriate scientist who's studying that. And then we also have our educational outreach, which is something, again, we're kind of doing it a little more locally right now, but we hope to expand. But that's taking things like floating classrooms, where we take kids out on the water to give them a hands-on experience. in learning about marine ecology, why it's important, and again how best to enjoy the marine environment. We're also helping high school students that maybe want to take a career track in that area, and just kind of giving them some of the experience that they might need. And then community engagement, which is basically getting the community involved in doing things like beach cleanups, dive cleanups, and there's a lot of underwater debris as well, and island cleanups too. And yes, it's good to clean up a beach, and maybe you'll get 100 or 200 pounds of trash in a day if you're out there long enough. But really, that's not the end game when it comes to our community engagement. Really, we want to again use it as a teachable moment and kind of show people, okay, well, what was most of what you picked up, and maybe those are things that you can use less of on your day to day, and that way less of it will end up as litter or garbage on the beach and then later in the ocean. So yeah, it's a lot, but we're very proud of the fact that we try to cover almost all the aspects of both, again, marine science and marine conservation through those different channels. So yeah, in a nutshell, that is our mission and how we accomplish it.
Yeah, and it's a fabulous mission, but it's also really well aligned, I think, with AGLCA, which is one of the reasons I was excited to have this conversation. Because whether or not loopers consider themselves environmentalists, they are generally very passionate about the health of our waterways. And we've looked in the past about how could we get that next generation of people who are passionate about the waterways involved now. So the floating classroom idea is really cool. But the fact that you can pair up individual boats with citizen scientists or scientists who really want to, do a project on the waterway but don't have access to a boat is really, I think, intriguing and something a lot of our members would be interested in. So tell us a little bit more, about how loopers can get involved, and maybe, an example or two of a private vessel that took some scientists aboard to run a project and what that was like.
Sure. Well, there's probably a number of ways. And to give you an example of a looper who has been on a scientific or hosted a scientific expedition,
Mm-hmm.
her name was Jolene. She's got a great 42-foot power cat
Mm-hmm.
and named Katniss. That was a great boat. I mean, it was able to accommodate 4 scientists plus myself for a few days. Out in the dry Tortugas, and then back all the way up the Florida Reef Tract. And they were researching different coral species and which ones kind of are more resilient to warming waters, which, as we've seen over the last couple weeks, the waters are getting pretty warm. And not all corals can survive that, but some can. So what was really cool about that is they were just seeing, okay, so which are the ones that are more resilient, and then maybe we can propagate that and introduce those into the places that are a little more at risk. Because again, as we know, as being boaters, I don't know how many loopers like to dive, but when you go down there and you see nothing but just, I don't know, dead, lifeless, bleached coral, and not only that, but the exodus of the species, all the fish that call that reef home, then there's not really much reason to be down there. So the fact that she helped these scientists study how to best preserve and maybe heal some damaged coral reefs, that was pretty cool. And that was just one example. I mean, loopers, I know that they not only are they going through certain rivers and everything, but they're in the Gulf of Mexico, correct? And in the,
Correct?
I
Yeah.
think, the Gulf Stream. And yeah, so I mean, these are all places that I've gotten proposals for in the past saying, hey, I need to be in this area for this number of days. Do you know anyone that's going to be there? And while I might not right offhand, who knows? Maybe there's some people out there doing the loop that can maybe slow down for a couple days or a few days and do something cool and then continue on their way. And that's just, again, like I said, that's our scientist-led expedition side of things. But citizen science is something where they don't even have to stop. I mean, they can just keep going, and what they can do is help map the bottom of the ocean. It's basically what they call bathymetry. And you do it every day without recording it, but you have a depth sounder,
Mm-hmm.
and everywhere you go, you're looking to see how deep is it. Are there any navigational hazards? Well, what this does, and it's called a data logger, and it's something that we provide to the boat, and it just records that. So at every GPS point, whatever the depth reads, the data logger records that, and then we send that data to the International Hydrographic Organization. They're the ones creating this unified kind of general bathymetric map of the ocean. So um, that's really cool, and you'd be basically contributing to this global effort that we have going on now. There's a lot of boats that have signed up, but we could always use more. And yeah, so I mean, those are just a couple examples of both scientist-led expeditions or citizen science that they can get involved in. I don't know, Aubrey, is there anything that comes to mind? Maybe I left
Yeah,
out.
I guess too, just the easiest way for loopers to get involved with that would be just to go to our website, and we have an application on there that they can sign up to become a Discovery Yacht. Just let us know what you're interested in, and we'll be able to point you in the right direction and get you set up with the tools that you would need for either the citizen science project that you're interested in participating with, or just keep you on our radar so that we know that you are interested in hosting a scientist-led expedition, and we can have, kind of your general itinerary on mind so that if a request comes in, we know who to reach out to. So that's a great
Exactly.
place to start, is just signing up as a Discovery Yacht.
That's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad, Tony, that you brought up Katniss, one of our looper boats, because it being a cat is a little bit different than some looper boats. We don't have a ton of cats.
Mm-hmm.
But the length 42 is pretty common for a looper boat. And I think the perception when people hear, a crew of 4 people coming aboard is that, oh my gosh, my boat's not big enough for that. But your scientists don't necessarily require a whole lot of space or comfort, do they? So, for example, I'm on a 41-foot boat. We've got one extra stateroom that is a pretty cozy, I think maybe a queen, maybe a double bed. So, but, if they're not too picky about their accommodations, we've got a pull-out sofa. Like, tell us a little bit about what you would need on the boat for it really to work for you.
Absolutely. So, each project and expedition is a little different. Sometimes the equipment that they need is minimal.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just have a good little storage area, or some space on deck where you can strap it down, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you're absolutely right to say that. I mean, these are people that are used to being in tiny little bunks as it
Mm-hmm.
is. Um, Man, I remember one story about a group of, I think it was 5 or 6 of them on a center console style boat down in Mexico. And I said, how did you sleep? Oh, we slept outside. We slept in the rain. So what about showers? And oh, no showers for the whole time. I mean, this is something that they're used to roughing it. So really anything helps. And but yes, you'd be surprised what you have and what you have to offer
Right.
if you just kind of, work with it a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And as far as kind of the citizen scientist and the bathymetric mapping project that you talked about, you mentioned that you provide the device. It kind of does that mapping automatically. Does the person whose boat it is have to do something to send the data, or is it all completely automated?
I can
It's
take this one.
yeah,
So
go for it.
yeah, our current loggers, it's about this big, and it plugs into the back of your NEMA 2000 into the backbone. We also have ones for the older I think it's one eight
Oh,
or eight
183.
something.
Yeah, oh,
083, that one,
0183.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That model, which then would just be hardwired in. And the one for the NEMA 2000s, that has a small micro USB card in the back of it. And so the users would then just have to unplug that USB card or push that out and put it onto their computer, upload the data, and they just send it directly to us through
Mm-hmm.
WeTransfer, which is a data sharing for large files. It's a free service, and they can just email that to us whenever they're at shore. But about every other month is what we ask our users to unplug the SD card and to send us that data. yeah, and the other style of logger has a USB stick, so that would just be recording the data on there. The nice thing about it too is that your data can remain completely anonymous. You don't have to have your boat's name attached to it, so you can have this data that you sent us completely anonymous, or we can get recognition for it, but all that gets sent to the International Hydrographic Organization in building this map.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So I do want to dive into your Green Guide to Boating, because there's lots of really great suggestions there, and particularly from newer boaters, I get a lot of questions about how they can do this and be friendly to the ocean and to the marine life that is there. So I want to jump into that. Let's take a quick moment and play a message from one of our sponsors. And when we come back, we'll shift over to the Green Guide to Boating. So we'll be back in a moment.
Curtis Stokes and Associates is a yacht brokerage company that specializes in Great Loop capable boats. Curtis Stokes is a supporter of AGLCA at the Admiral level. If you're looking to buy or sell a Great Loop veteran from a trusted and knowledgeable broker, visit the company on the web at curtisstokes.net, email curtisstokes@curtisstokes.net, or call 954-684-0218. Did you know that every mile of the Great Loop is covered by Skipper Bob guides? Its mile-by-mile format is a great planning tool and essential at the helm. On the most popular routes and side trips, Skipper Bob covers preparation, navigation, bridges and locks, and the best places to visit. Skipper Bob guides are updated each year, and its website keeps you current with navigation alerts and cruising news. To check it out, go to skipperbob.net. Skipper Bob is a proud Admiral sponsor of AGLCA.
We're back on the Great Loop Radio podcast. Today we are talking with Seakeepers.org. We've got Aubrey and Tony here, and they're kind of filling us in on what this great organization is doing for our oceans and how loopers can get involved. So we've talked about some of the research type projects, which is really fascinating, and I hope a lot of you will jump on that opportunity. But I also want to talk about the Green Guide to Boating, because particularly for our newer boaters, we get lots of questions about this, and whether or not you are trying to be more green in your everyday life. Being a green boater does not just mean you're being kind to the ocean. You're also kind of being kind to your boat and often kind of kind to your wallet as well. So let's kind of jump into that a little bit. Aubrey, I don't know if this is one that you're better to answer, but talk to us a little bit more kind of in general terms. How do green actions like reducing fuel usage, talk about how that can benefit obviously loopers, but also the environment at the same time?
Yeah, so I guess like the obvious answer to this and how it could benefit a looper is that it's going to save you money. So if you're reducing your fuel usage, that's going to be friendlier on the wallet, but also reduces your CO2 emissions. So that creates less of a strain on coastal habitats that loopers are out there trying to enjoy. Areas like mangroves and seagrass beds that work as huge stores for carbon dioxide. So if we're putting less of that into those coastal habitats that are storing it for us, we're not going to be putting as much of a strain on that environment.
Right. So some of our loopers who have been out there for a while probably know what they can do to cut down on the fuel usage. But for some who may be newer and are still kind of don't have the boat yet, what are some of the easy ways they can go ahead and reduce the amount of fuel that they're using?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things that you can do to reduce your fuel consumption. One is just run your boat at optimal levels. Don't run it all the way as hard as it can go to its top speed. Typically, you kind of want to run your boat at about 60% to 80% of what your top speed is, and that'll help to really reduce and optimize your fuel usage. You also want to make sure you keep your hull clean. That can create, if you have a lot of stuff hanging on the bottom, that can create a lot of drag to your vessel. Things like just the weight of your vessel, everything that you store on board. So if you're always going out with a full tank rather than planning your passage, full water tank, full tank of gas, everything just full to the brim, full of provisions, that's going to use a bit more fuel because you've got a little bit more weight that you're trying to transport around. Simple things like when you're at anchor, maybe if you could use stuff like solar panels to run your appliances and your air conditioning, use that battery rather than having to run a generator, can help you reduce your fuel. And also just make sure that you're maintaining your engine quite well, make sure you have clean fuel filters and you can put additives in your fuel to make sure it's cleaner, so that just is, increasing your efficiency.
And these are all great ideas, and I love that they're included in your green guide to boating, because a lot of people would just consider this normal boat maintenance. But it makes such a difference to the environment and to the amount of fuel you're using, and it's just a new way to frame it, and gives us just another reason to really, do the things we should be doing on our boat anyway. And every boat's going to find that sweet spot on the fuel economy. Again, great for the wallet, but also great for the environment. So anything else loopers can do to help offset their carbon footprint while they're on the loop?
One thing, sorry,
No, you can go for that, Tony.
No, it's just something that you reminded me when you're saying when you're at anchor, you can use solar panels, and to not run your generator. However, when you're at in a marina, when you're at dock, use shore power, which again, I'm sure a lot of people do anyway, but it's something that, helps you save your diesel and your generator usage. One thing that I was thinking also is, some kind of what's it called, a wind turbine. Some boats have that, but again, these are little things that, yeah, I'm not saying power your entire boat with it, or but it's kind of like if you use it in conjunction with, and just shut off your generator every once in a while and just kind of get your electrical from things like solar panels or wind turbines, that could really help. But yeah, and some people might be a little skeptical of bottom paints and say, oh, well, that's not great for the environment too. And it really depends. I mean, yeah, there's some that are copper heavy, and maybe that's not the best. There's alternatives to that. And last but not least is just, you could always use a little bit of elbow grease. And if you're bored one day and you want to maybe just scrape that biofoul off the bottom of your hull. My dad has a boat. I see him do it all the time. He kind of doesn't know how to relax. So even when he should be relaxing, he'll be down there scraping. And it's just, it kind of, again, saves you maybe another trip to the yard to get it painted if you just take it off yourself. Yeah, we've talked a lot about carbon footprint and fuel usage, but there's a lot of other things that in boating that one just doesn't really take into account. But like water, we all need water. We need to drink it. We need it for plumbing purposes. But for drinking water, if you don't have a good water maker on board, then what do you have to do? You have to stock up on single-use plastic water bottles. And for a long enough voyage, you're going to have a good amount. And it's not to say that you shouldn't be drinking water. No, you should. But I would say, and I would strongly encourage people to go out there and get yourself a good water maker. I mean, I was just on an expedition on a boat that had a water maker, and it desalinates, and what you get is just pure H2O. It's perfect. It's perfectly drinkable. Yeah, so just something to consider. And other single-use plastic alternatives as well, which we sort of have a lot of examples of that, I think, in the Green Guide to Boating, as well as other resources on our website.
Yeah, and we actually, there are some places on the loop where using a water maker is not real practical, because you're in rivers as opposed to the ocean and salt. But we've converted to 5-gallon recyclable, reusable bottles that we exchange to refill, and it has saved us a ton of plastic on the boat. And it was pretty easy. I didn't do it myself, but Michael hooked up a feeder that takes takes from that water bottle to a separate spigot on the galley sink, and it's worked really well for us. And those bottles are pretty easy to come by even when you're traveling. One thing that worries me every time we fill up is the potential for a fuel spill, even a small amount when you're fueling up the boat. And I know you kind of cover that in the Green Guide as well. So what are some practices you would suggest to avoid spilling some fuel when you're refueling?
Well, I think the best practice for that is to really know your vessel, know what your tank's capacity is, have an accurate measurement of how much fuel you have in your tank so that you know how much you can take on. And then when you're fueling, always keep, spill kits nearby. The oil absorption pads are great just to wrap around the pump while you're using it in case there's any drips that come down the side. And also fuel dock should have a large supply of like all the absorbent socks and pads on hand in case there are spills and incidents. One thing that might seem a bit counterintuitive to new boaters is just don't use a detergent or soap to make it go away. I know we've seen some ecological disasters of oil spills where they're like, oh, Dawn dish soap, spray in the water, it'll make it disperse. That's actually kind of counterproductive. What it does is it actually breaks down the oils into smaller pieces, making it harder to clean up and more toxic to marine life. So it's still there, it's just in smaller, less noticeable pieces rather than spread evenly out on the surface that could easily just be wiped up with a oil absorption pad or contained by some booms that the fuel dock might have on hand to help contain and clean that up.
Okay. And I've seen some very experienced boaters who know their boat well kind of listen, put their ear right by the fill spot on their boat as they're fueling, and they can hear when it's almost full. I've also seen some boats with fuel whistles that'll start to whistle when the tank gets almost full. If you're not confident with those, it's a great idea to just know what your tank holds and how much you've burned, and not be so worried about filling it to that last spot that it overflows at all. But interesting that you brought up kind of the detergents, because another question I get asked a lot from new boaters in particular is concerns about gray water. And of course, gray water is being flushed out of the boat. And I say flushed, it's not sewage. The gray water, of course, for anybody who's new to this, is the water that's coming out of your showers, your kitchen sink, and then leaving the boat. Most boats do not have a gray water holding tank, so anything you're using to wash dishes or yourself is being sent out into the water. So what are your recommendations there to make sure that we are leaving minimal damage, if any, to what we're leaving behind?
Yeah, so for the gray water, yeah, it is a bit trickier with you guys on the smaller vessels, and you don't have holding tanks to be able to treat that water. So you have to be really conscious of what you're putting down the drain, what you're using, what kind of soaps you're using, and making sure that they're non-toxic. Really look for those parabens, because parabens are going to be one of the more toxic things that prevents animals from breathing and reproducing the way they're meant to. So yeah, just be super careful with what you put down the drain. I mean, if you can, find alternative hand soaps and dish soaps that, are completely non-toxic, that would be the best way when you're washing dishes in your hands.
Mm-hmm. Any particular brands or anything we should look for to know that it's really non-toxic and is going to be not harmful to the marine life?
Oh, yeah. So there is one brand that we have used before called Stream to Sea, and they make a lot of different products like sunscreens, but they also have shampoos and conditioners that are completely reef safe and biodegradable, non-toxic, paraben-free. They have a whole big line of different products, but Stream to Sea is one that we do recommend, and we've used their sunscreens and things like that before. I've used their leave-in conditioner. It's pretty decent.
What about products that you might be using to wash the boat, because all that's going to end up in the water as well? So any recommendations there?
I don't have any specific brands to recommend. Tony, you might. I would just say that, we're at a good time of awareness that so many brands out there are putting out eco-friendly products. Of course, as a buyer, you need to be aware of greenwashing and actually try and look at what the ingredients are, rather than just seeing one that says organic. Might not always be paraben free, or it might not always be like toxin free. So yeah, just try and do your research on them, but there's so many options out there for that nowadays, fortunately.
And the one that I'm aware of is a brand called Washdown. So as that's basically the one that I've heard of, but it's supposed to be one of the better ones in terms of washing your deck.
Excellent. Thank you for that. You mentioned a little bit about bottom paint, to avoid the ones that are super copper heavy, but any suggestions on either bottom paint or some of the newer anti-fouling technology that might be a better choice?
So I mean, most bottom paints use what are called biocides to basically just kill whatever is growing on your hull. The problem with it is that as those biocides released from your hull paint, it can be really harmful to marine life. So again, with the whole, making more eco-friendly products, a lot of marine paint companies are now offering new types of eco paints that don't contain any biocides in them. And one example of that would be like a foul release coating. So rather than just poisoning any creature that comes into contact with the hull, this can be like a silicone or fluoropolymer based paint, which can make a smooth, slick surface, and organisms just have a hard time attaching to it. I have heard of some really interesting technologies out there that do have a sort of way to repel any types of marine life from attaching onto it, and they're a little bit more high tech. Actually, Kim, I might have heard of it from you. I think one of
Hull
your
Shield is one of our sponsors that has an anti-fouling device that goes, and it's a supersonic or some kind of sonic device that goes on the bottom of the boat, and it works to prevent the growth of any of those organisms on the bottom of the boat. So I've heard rave reviews of that, and not only is it more environmentally friendly, but it can save you money of having to repaint the bottom and have the bottom scraped and all of those things. So definitely a newer technology and something that's emerging, but something to check out. And that one that in particular is Hull Shield, and they're a sponsor, and they give AGLCA members a discount. So certainly something to look at.
Right.
I want to talk a little bit about just kind of general navigation and anchoring, and what can loopers do as they're out there, particularly when they hit the Gulf and they hit the Florida Keys, which is a very sensitive ecosystem. What should we be looking out for when we are navigating and anchoring to make sure that we're not damaging those coral reefs, or running into a manatee, or any of those things that we want to all avoid doing?
Well, the first easy answer there is mooring balls. See if wherever you're going to be, if they have mooring balls, then great. You're basically not taking this very large fork and just scraping along the bottom, which is basically what our anchors do every once in a while. Just be aware, and most places that need that extra protection, hopefully they will already have mooring balls in place. Just be mindful. And also, seagrasses are super important, and that's another thing that can suffer from anchoring. So again, if you're in a seagrass heavy area, hopefully there are some mooring balls around. I would say and if you do have to drop anchor, do so carefully. Try not to drag it. Those are my 2 cents. But Aubrey, I don't know if you have anything
not dragging your anchor is great. Making sure that you're in a designated anchor area so that you're not disturbing areas that haven't had anchors dropped on them before. So if you're in a designated anchoring area, then that the seabed isn't going to be quite as abundant with life. And two, just on your navigation as well, just being familiar with your vessel. The more that you know about it, like for example, your depth transponder might not be at the lowest point of your vessel. So knowing what the offset is. So if you see that, I have 3 feet below the boat, but you're measuring from the water line and you have your draft to take into account, then that you might not be in a good place. So knowing where your depth transducer is actually located and what you might have to account for and offset that, being familiar with your vessel's actual draft and what the depths are. Using charts. Some people, forget to use their charts, forget to use their instruments to plan their route in advance, and might just wing it if they seem familiar with an area. But it's quite important to understanding what could be there and any hazards along the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And go ahead, Tony.
So, no, I was just going to say on that same note, updating your charts. I know a lot of people have like Navionics and things like that, and you want to hope or try to always have the most up to date, because things like shoals and other areas, they can change from 1 month to the next. And again, that's another funny, I guess, if not somewhat scary experience I once had. where we were on a 100-foot yacht, and the captain had to put both sticks, I mean, like as fast as he could in full reverse, because something had shifted in the shoals, and it just wasn't reflected on his charts. And so it was his mate who was watching the depth kind of going up and up and up and up, or rather the number going down, down, down. And he said, hey, I think we're gonna hit. And then so we avoided that, but that's why, you want to make sure that if you are relying on charts, or you're in a place that you haven't been before, just hope that you have the most up-to-date charts.
Yes. And that's kind of a unwritten rule for loopers to begin with. I think all of us have some fear and trepidation about the potential of running aground like that. So doing so on a coral reef, or where there's a lot of wildlife, is even more damaging, not just to the boat, but to the coral reef. But so the point is, if just protecting our boat is not enough of a reason for some of us to do these right things, the fact that it is the best thing for the waterways is also a really good reason to avoid that. And as I mentioned, the Florida Keys is one of probably the most sensitive ecological place, I would say, on the Great Loop. And because of that, there are some extra regulations around anchoring and things like that. So if you're headed for the Keys, just make sure you check that out. Aubrey and Tony, anything else that I have not asked about? I don't think we covered any suggestions you have for boaters. We're sharing the water with marine life. Some of those species, like manatee, are rather large. We've been to the Keys and seen, a sea turtle hospital where some of the shells, the turtles had been hit by boats. What can boaters do to, somehow find a better way to keep an eye on the wildlife, so we're not doing damage to the animals on our way?
I guess the quick and easy answer to that is just to educate yourself on what marine life is in that area. If you're in a manatee heavy area, that you need to keep a really active and vigilant watch out. Have a lookout on your bow even, or just if your bridge is in a good position to be able to see things below you. Wear polarized glasses so you can see kind of slightly beneath the water, see what animals are kind of there. Really respect no wake zones, because those are put in place to protect wildlife like marine mammals or turtles, because those hits can be fatal to turtles and manatees. If you do see something in the water, slow down. Not only will it give you time to enjoy and look at the animal, but it'll also increase your reaction time, and make sure that in case there are other animals present with it, like if there's a mom with its baby, manatee cruising around together, you are slowed down enough so that you can maneuver and avoid hitting one.
Excellent. These are great tips. We are going to post a link to the Green Guide to Boating in the comments on all of the different channels where we post this. But if people want to go directly to your site, can they get the Green Guide to Boating there?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Mm-hmm. On our site, they'll be able to find the Green Guide to Boating, and also be able to sign up to become a Discovery Yacht if they're interested as well.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And
so just
go
ahead.
I was going to say, just to point you in the exact right direction if they want to see that. Under our work, there's a section called the Green Marine Program, and under that, the Green Guide to Boating is there. But like Aubrey said, our whole website is there, and there are links to actually becoming a Discovery Yacht if you'd like to experience something really, really cool. And just let us know, and we'll get you set up.
Yeah, excellent. So once again, it is the International Seakeepers Society is the full name of the organization, and the website is seakeepers.org. So easy to find. Lots of resources on the website. Aubrey and Tony, I want to thank you for joining us. Aubrey, again, is the Program Development Manager, and Tony Gilbert is the Chief Program Officer for the International Seakeepers Society, seakeepers.org. Thank you for joining us and for sharing all these tips.
Yeah, thank you.
I also want to give a quick shout out to Mary Grace Boland. She is our high school intern, and she is an aspiring marine scientist, and she thoroughly enjoyed going through the Green Guide to Boating and helping construct these questions. So Mary Grace, I know you're going to be listening to this. Thank you for helping with that as well. And thanks to everyone who has watched or listened to this week. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Great Loop Radio podcast. Until then, safe cruising.